Hello, welcome to Blueprints. I'm Bodine Sanders, your producer and host. Joining me today is Grant Harris, Grant T. Harris, author of Unlocking Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Success, Develop Policies and Procedures, How to Create a DEI Framework, Measure Progress and Accountability, and make systematic changes in the workplace. Grant, how you doing? Welcome to the program, Blueprints. How are you?
Bodine, good to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you and your listeners. Very excited.
Well, listen, let me finish up with Grant is also a consultant, a certified diversity executive, a strategist, board member, and something that we also have in common, besides being authors and board members and that kind of experience, a former D1 student athlete. So, you know, we have lots of things in common. So, and by the way, congrats on the book. Congrats on the book.
Thank you.
Right? Well, let's jump right into it because, you know, regardless if I'm in my home studio via Zoom or in the studio, the first question I ask all my guests is share with me your blueprint and positive perspective on DEI.
Great question, Bo. I appreciate that. You know, my perspective and positive viewpoint on DEI has to do with mindsets and behaviors. I'm a psychology undergrad. My grad work was in organizational development and psychology. I like to think about my thinking. I hold a growth mindset. And if anyone's familiar with the growth mindset concept and the work of Carolyn Dweck, I'm always thinking positive. One of my life mantras is get 1% better every day. So when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I help individuals and institutions move from a mindset of compliance to a mindset of community. Compliance is very check the box. It's very, we do this because we have to, because someone told us to, and it's the very bare minimum. Community, however, is different. Community is purposeful. It has intent. It's dedicated. And it involves working with people that don't look like you, sound like you, come from all different backgrounds, because we all come from small communities, large communities. It doesn't matter. We all have those inherent similar experiences. So it's all about moving from a mindset of compliance and moving towards the behaviors of community. And I always try to preach and teach that behavior is how we get to the mountaintop when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It can't just be a thought, and it can't just be a promise. It has to be action behind those things. So moving from compliance to community is my positive perspective on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Very good. Very good. Well, listen, you've shared a number of things, and we're going to get into it in this short 30-minute conversation. But share with the audience your origin story. You have a very interesting story.
Yeah, my story is kind of like being the first and the only in my family. I have a lot of firsts and I have a lot of onlys within my family. The first to go to a military school, the first to get to earn a college athletic scholarship, the first to have kids. The only one of my siblings to be a homeowner at the moment, the first and the only one to sit on for-profit and nonprofit boards and be in those leadership roles. However, I don't hold the distinction of being the first and the only to write a book. There are other authors in my family. My sister is also an author and a voiceover artist. But several of those things. And another distinction would be being the first and the only in my nuclear family to be diagnosed with autism and to be a person with a disability. So a lot of firsts and a lot of onlys. And that also extends to my place in the world. I'm usually the first or the only person of color, or I've been the youngest, or I'm the only one that is outspoken about my disability. Although other people in the room might be disabled, there's a large chance that there are other people are, but I go out of my way to talk about it in a positive way. So being the first and only is something that I'm used to in my personal and my professional life. And I kind of relish that opportunity. I sometimes I wish that it didn't have to be that way. I don't want to always be the first or the only or the youngest and these types of things. I don't look for that. It just happens to be that from the opportunities that I have been given, and the blessings that have been bestowed upon me. But my origin story is usually what it's about being the first and the only. And for my children and for my family and friends that I care about, my hope is that they don't have to be the first and the only, but if they are, they would have seen that from me, had a model from me to emulate moving forward.
Well, again, there's a lots of things, and I've been talking about this a long time, right? You build relationships by having conversations. And when you have those conversations, you find out what you have in common, right? Right. On the surface, it's easy to see that you and I have something in common, right? But in order to find out deeply or deeper, we have to have a conversation. And I wrote about, me being a first in some of those categories that you were first. I wasn't the first out of my immediate family, right? My sister was the first of my siblings to go to college, right? And my mom sacrificed to make sure her oldest daughter was going to go to college, in HBCU. And then I became the first male, right? Mm-hmm. Out of my mom's children to go to college. I had a brother a year older. I had a sister a year older. However, my father, I like to describe my father, who was a musician. I describe him as an Urkel, but he was I say a papa was a Rolling Stone. So he had a number of children. So I had a total of 6 sisters. So, but out of the 6 sisters, 4 of them went to college. So I understand that. I understand how you feel. So
yeah, I'm on HBCU. I'm also the first of my immediate family to graduate college on time. My father didn't until he was much later in life, which is great because in America you can go to school anytime.
Anytime.
But I'm the first to go to a PWI or predominantly white institution. All of the rest of my family went to HBCUs. So I'm very familiar with the HBCU life. But I went to a place in a school at the time was upwards of 80% white and 90% male. Those numbers have evened out over time, but certainly have that similar experience as well.
Yep. All the women in my family went to a HBCU. I started, which my story. I started at an HBCU, the oldest HBCU in the United States. We can have that debate later on, and then transferred to a PWI. So let's get into the book. But before we get into the book, let's talk about, because you touched base on it a little bit. Let's talk about the autism and how being autistic and how you found out that later in life and how that has impacted your life moving forward.
Yeah, interesting story. I owe a debt of gratitude to my wife. She was the catalyst behind me getting a diagnosis, and she sent me an article and said, "Look at this. I think you might want to pursue this a little bit." And it was an article about your spouse or your mate might be autistic, and it was 10 traits. And I saw 7 or 8 traits that I definitely could see in myself. I said, "Yeah, this sounds like me. This could be me." Fast forward to getting a diagnosis. Again, I had been working in the DEI space at this point, and I was aware of neurodiversity, but I hadn't pursued looking into it deeper because I didn't have a reason to on a personal level, outside the professional level. But my diagnosis certainly opened my eyes to that. So my wife was a big help when it came to that. This was late in life. This was going on 2 years ago. Usually, uh, autistic people are diagnosed in their formative years, anywhere between 3 and 6. But that didn't happen for me. I, however, have come to find out since the pandemic that many more adults have been getting diagnosed. And that's great. For whatever reason that they're getting diagnosed, it's good because it helps them understand themselves more. It helps them ground themselves and see how they operate in the world. So for me, being autistic, I think is awesome. Personally, I didn't have some of the trepidation that a lot of people have with being a person with a disability and what comes along with that. Fortunately, I've been in circles where I can have those conversations and I can self advocate and I have other people around me to advocate for me and with me. But that's not always the case, which is why I talk about my disability so much, so that other people can see that it's okay to talk about it and that it doesn't need to be stigmatized and that it can be normalized. So for me, being autistic has given me lots of advantages in terms of knowing myself on a deeper level, how I communicate, what I need to succeed throughout my day to day life, personally and professionally. And it's also allowed me to become a writer and write about these topics with the book.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question, which was who or what inspired you to write the book?
Yeah, so I never thought about being an author. It was not something that I said, man,
Join the
I
club.
get into this work and I'm going to be here. I'm going to be an author. In high school and all of my schooling, I was always a good writer. I got great grades in English class. I enjoyed English. I did not hate writing papers. It came a little bit naturally to me. These type of things. I've always been good with words. This is what other people tell me. You're great with words. You always know what to say in terms of story. These types of things. As I grew and grew into my consulting life and working with other organizations, I wanted to add something more to my repertoire outside of just strategy and planning, outside of just moving the blocks around in order to make companies more effective and efficient and equitable. So I started adding writing services, reviewing policies, updating and editing strategic communications, things that were going out. And I came across an opportunity which originally was meant to be a ghostwriting opportunity for these books. And I was going to be in the background and I was going to do the writing. I'm going to work with the publisher and I was all set. But in conversation with that publisher, she said, well, you have all the knowledge, you have all the expertise, you have all the passion. Like you should probably be writing these books on your own. You should probably take this opportunity to be an author. And I said, huh, maybe so. So I talked about it with my wife, I prayed on it. And lo and behold, here the first book is published. It's a series of 5 books that focus on workplace culture from a DEI perspective, using those principles and those tenets. So the first book is about frameworks, as you see being published, and the second is about bias and all different types of bias, not just unconscious. The third will be about inclusive leadership. So they all have these tying in themes as we go along that tie back to the original first book as well. So again, didn't really anticipate becoming an author, but saw it as an opportunity to put my skill set on paper, so to speak, and also to expand my platform and expand my voice so that other people could understand this work and apply it themselves.
Gotcha. Well, listen, we're at the halfway point, so I want to get some more of these questions in. Let's open up the book, right? Let's talk about the acronym RACE, RACE, and the framework that you speak about and write about. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So race is an acronym, and a lot of times in DEI conversations, it gets relegated to race, black and white, which I disagree with. However, that is a starting point that most people are familiar with. That is a place to begin, which most people can understand to get to other aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So originally, this idea was about the race to DEI. How do we get to diversity, equity, and inclusion? How do we get there faster? So in my mind, I was thinking about the race, and it came down to an acronym, which is a 4-step process. So the first is R, which is recognition of who and where you are. And you means an individual or an organization. This can apply to an individual person. It can apply to departments. It can apply to larger organizations. A is for acknowledge. Acknowledge your intent and your impact. C is for cultivate. And you're cultivating tools, resources, and education. And last but not least, E is to engage and empower. So all these 4 steps are necessary for organizations to move from, again, compliance to community and ultimately achieve what I like to call organizational excellence. And that takes a process and that takes time. So first, in recognizing who and where you are, you have to sit with some simple truths about who you are as a person, if you're a leader in an organizational space, or if you're just an individual contributor. Who are you? What are your personal values? What was your upbringing? How has that affected your place in the world? And where are you in your personal journey of diversity, equity, and inclusion? All of us, you, me, are on different stages of that journey. And wherever you are is okay, as long as you're on that path. So it starts with that. And then we move through acknowledging how goals and objectives and the intent of goals and objectives and the intent of what you say versus the impact. You may intend one thing, but the impact is certainly something different. And I see this all the time in my household with my kids. I may say something a certain way, and that's my intent, but the impact comes across completely different. And that is the same in the DEI space as well. And when you're cultivating tools and education, tools and resources, educate yourself, all of us have to be continuous lifelong learners. So educating yourself not only about what your realm and what you know, but about other cultures, cultural competence, and understanding those principles as well. And last but not least, engaging and empower. So once you have the tools and the resources, you got to engage. You have to act. You have to take that step forward. And you have to empower other people. If you're a leader, you need to empower other people to do the same, to go through this process as well. So that's the framework. It is being trademarked as we speak as a proprietary framework. I'm going to have a visual so people can digest that past just the black and white text. So it's a process, but that's how the race framework works.
And I like the hashtag we, not me. That's included in that. But you know, it's funny. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to review or read my book, but in the beginning of my memoir, I have an illustration of the word race and a definition above the word and a meaning below the word, because again, the word race has, at least two different meanings or definition. One is competition, right? Which we were talking about, the race or the competitiveness to get to, right? To the DEI process or through the process. And then obviously the one that most people think race means, which is, the color of your skin and ethnicity and all that stuff. So, because, my book is a binary narrative. It's about how team sports is a great way to build relationships. So I, like you, look beyond on the surface and take a deeper dive. So I like what you created. That's very, very good. Very good. For companies and organizations starting to focus on their DEI initiatives, what advice would you give them?
One, start with my framework. But yeah, You have to take a step back and look at who you are as a company. You have to look at your values. You have to look at your mission. You have to look at your vision and reevaluate and reevaluate what you have been doing. And are you upholding those values and missions, not only to your customers and externally, but more so internally? Are you accountable for the things that you say that you are? Are you accountable for the actions that you take or don't take in the market? So if you're just starting, you have to ask a lot of questions. Ask yourself a lot of questions. Ask the people around you a lot of questions. And although, race, we talk about a race and everybody thinks fast and speed, but that's not always the case. There are marathon races that are very long and take a lot of time. So this takes time if you do it right. But where you start is with yourself as the individual, if you are the leader of an organization, or collectively with a leadership team, or collectively with your group. You have to ask yourself hard questions and be able to be truthful with those questions and have a mirror, hold up a mirror to yourself. Because if you don't start there, all the rest of the steps and all the rest of the work will be faulty and it will be disingenuous if you can't start with recognizing who and where you are on that particular journey. So I say pause and take a breath, ask a lot of questions, ask deep questions, and try to answer those questions truthfully before you move through a process just to get to an end result that may not align with your organizational goals, mission, and values.
Well, listen, I have to bring sports because you mentioned team a number of times, right? A number of times. So, my focus this year is to use sports as an example, right? To interview more folks in the sports field because team sports is a great example of how everyone can come together, be on the same page to accomplish a goal, right? How do you see team sports being that good example for organizations to emulate or at least consider researching to see how, right? How big sports organizations start at the beginning of the season and end up winning the championship. Because that's not easy. Everybody has to do their part and has to play their role and be on the same page. Would you agree?
100%. I played sports the majority of my life up until the college ranks. And then after college, I decided to turn my view to the business world. But being a scholarship athlete, I was captain multiple times throughout my high school and college career. And being in a position of leadership is being in a position to serve the purposes of the greater goal. So it is less about me or less about that one person and what that one person wants or needs, and more about the overall goal and how that person's wants and needs is fitting into that picture, and how that person receives the tools and the resources and the access that they need to be the best that they can be for that purpose, number one, and for the team overall, number two. So having been a captain, having been a scholarship athlete, I was a football player. I played other sports, but in college it was football. And in my opinion, football is the ultimate team sport because there's no one player that can win a football game. It has to be several others. I've seen basketball. You can have a player in a basketball game just take over and they can win that game just by themselves because they're so much greater than the others. There are lots of different sports out there, but most of them require that it be a team effort. And I have to rely on the person to my left and to my right and to my front and to my back in order for us all to move towards that end goal. So with that said, I think sports, specifically football, but sports in and of themselves, is a great example of how to team sports we're talking about. There are other individual sports, but team sports
right.
that you have to find ways to take a step back from yourself, to take a step forward and meet other people so that you can achieve the ultimate goal, which is to win and which is to be excellent. To achieve excellence overall, it's got to be less of you and more of us. So I do think the team sports is an excellent uh, example of how you could parlay that to the organizational business world.
I 100% agree. 100% agree. Grant, how can people reach you? You want to share your email or website?
Yeah, certainly. So you can reach me at grant at compliance2community.com. And my website is also compliance2community.com. And I am also on LinkedIn, which is where you'll find most of my conversation around these topics and others. But I am happy to talk to folks via email. I'm happy to have conversations. And again, that's grant at compliance2community.com. And the website is compliance2community.com.
Real quickly, anything that any projects that you're going to be working on? I know you just said you're working on continuing to work on your book, and hopefully you and I can have a conversation about how we can collaborate. But anything that's coming up in the future?
Yeah, so continuing to work on the books. Like I said, that's a 5-part series. I've got lots of conversations, fireside chats coming up in the spring. I actually have a book signing, my first book signing at a local bookstore here in the Washington, D.C. area. I will continue to be spreading the word on podcasts and in Slack channels about neurodiversity at work, about organizational behavior, and about corporate board work and how that could be more diverse as well. So a lot of conversations, a lot of podcasts, a lot of panel interviews coming up here in the spring, and continuing to write and publish the books as the year goes on. So you can look forward to a lot from me. And yes, I certainly would welcome the opportunity to collaborate with you, Bo, because this has been an awesome opportunity to be here to chat with you.
Oh, appreciate it. Well, listen, I'll wrap it up with this. We don't have all the answers, folks, but we're going to endeavor to listen, to learn, and to share as much as we can with the audience so they can gain more information, because it's all about knowledge, right? And this is a work in progress, ongoing training, ongoing conversations. That's the way I see it. So Grant T. Harris, thank you. We appreciate you being a guest on the Blueprint Show. We've come to the end of the program, folks, and thank you for your time and consideration and your attention. Stay tuned. There's always more to come.